Peace be upon you, dear viewers. This is not merely a story of a debate. It is the story of a boy, a professor, and a moment so profound, so unforeseen, that it stilled an entire hall of intellects. A story where no voices were raised, yet truth echoed louder than thunder. A story where a 10-year-old child didn't crush disbelief with force, but dissolved it with purity. Not with noise, but with a silence so deep it trembled through hearts. And somewhere, in that silence, a cat waited, still watchful, for that sacred moment to arrive. It all began in a radiant city, gleaming with modern lights and humming with ambition. In a modest corner of that vast, restless place lived a boy named Adam. He was just 10. His home was humble, nestled between dusty alleys and aging brick walls. His father, once a bicycle repairman, was now bedridden due to illness. His mother worked tirelessly at a local convenience shop. They had enough to get by. No more, no less. But Adam was no ordinary child. There was something timeless in his gaze, a quiet maturity in the way he observed the world. He didn't ask the usual questions children ask. He asked about justice, about truth, about the reason behind things. Neighbors often said, "That boy's soul is older than his years." And wherever Adam went, a quiet white cat followed. No one knew where she came from. Some believed Adam had adopted her. Others whispered she had chosen him. But once, Adam quietly told a neighbor, "She doesn't follow me. She walks with me, like she knows something." The cat never meowed in public, never begged, never caused trouble. She just sat, alert, graceful, and listening. Meanwhile, across the globe lived a man with a very different view of life. Professor Jonathan Miller, a world-renowned atheist. He had written bestsellers dismissing faith, spoken at elite universities, and declared, "Religion is myth. Comforting lies we tell ourselves. Only science holds the truth." To some, he was a genius. To others, a provocateur. But no one denied his impact. He often scoffed at Islam in particular, a book written 14 centuries ago. How can it guide an age of satellites and quantum theory? A grand interfaith conference was announced, broadcasted globally. Theme: Faith and Reason, Enemies or Allies. Thinkers, scholars, and scientists from around the world were invited. Among the speakers, Professor Miller, headliner, of course, but tucked quietly into the guest list was a curious entry. A 10-year-old boy representing the youth division of a local school council. His name, Adam. When the invitation came, his mother hesitated. "This is a stage for scholars, my son. They hold degrees and titles." Adam smiled gently. "They may know more books, Mother, but perhaps I know a little more heart." On the day of the event, Adam wore a simple white shirt, black trousers, and no notes, but beside him walked the same white cat. No leash, no commands, just presence. The grand hall, its floors marble and lights golden, quieted as Adam entered. Whispers spread. A child? With a cat? Some laughed, others frowned, but Adam's calm steps never wavered. The cat curled at his feet, still and alert. The lights dimmed. Professor Jonathan Miller took the stage to thunderous applause. He smiled, adjusted his mic, and began. "Ladies and gentlemen," he declared, "we live in an age of rockets to Mars, and yet still teach children that prayers move mountains. Isn't it time we let go of myths?" Silence. Some nodded, others shifted uneasily. He continued, "Take the Quran, praised by over 1 billion people, yet filled with contradictions, fairy tales, and outdated science." He challenged the room. "If anyone dares prove me wrong, step forward." Among the crowd, Adam looked down briefly. The cat opened its eyes. The moderator began the open forum. Questions were asked, dodged with wit and sarcasm. Then came a soft, clear voice. "Excuse me, sir." All heads turned. A child stood. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "Yes, young man. What's on your mind?" Adam met his eyes and gently asked, "Does the science you believe in teach anything about mercy or compassion?" The room stilled. Jonathan chuckled. "Science teaches facts, not fairy tales." Adam replied, "Then how does it explain things it cannot measure? Like love, or the silence in this room?" The professor's grin faltered. "And what about the Quran?" Adam continued. "The one you mock. Yet it keeps transforming lives, even those who once thought as you do." Jonathan retorted, "Believing doesn't make something true." Adam nodded. "Agreed. But neither does denying it." Scattered claps. The mood was shifting. The cat twitched, ears up, tail swaying slowly. Jonathan leaned forward, challenging. "Prove to me that your God is real, not in books, but here and now." Adam gently placed his hand on the cat. "She's not here by accident," he said. Sir," he said, "do contradictions prove flaw, or our failure to understand?" Jonathan scoffed. "Classic religious excuse." Adam pressed on. "But don't scientists revise theories too, not because nature is wrong, but because we misunderstood it?" The room stirred. As for stars as missiles, those verses speak in metaphors about unseen worlds. And the 6 days, the Arabic word used is ayam, meaning periods, not 24-hour days. Whispers broke out. Phones lit up. "Is that true?" "And about war," Adam said. "The Quran allowed fighting only in self-defense, to protect the innocent, never for conquest." Jonathan interrupted. "But your religion has extremists." Adam replied evenly. "And atheism has tyrants. Stalin was an atheist. Did that make atheism violent, or was it a man who lost his soul?" The blow landed harder than expected. The professor's grip on the podium tightened. The smirk faded. He stared at the boy, not with amusement now, but with unease. "Do you believe your God listens to you right now?" he asked. Adam nodded, and the cat, silent all this time, blinked once, as if she too was listening. "Do you really believe it holds knowledge greater than all our scientific discoveries?" Jonathan asked, his tone laced with skepticism. "I do," Adam replied calmly, "because it taught humans to seek knowledge when the world was still drowning in darkness. It told us to observe the stars, reflect on creation, and read, long before science even had a name." Jonathan's voice grew sharper. "Then why do scientists still reject it?" "Not all do," Adam answered gently. "Many embrace it. Others misunderstand it, just like people often misunderstand science itself." A woman in the audience leaned toward her neighbor and whispered, "Why is this child so calm? He speaks like he's lived far more than 10 years." The white cat beside Adam lifted her head. Her ears turned, not in response to a sound, but as if sensing something. Her eyes settled briefly on the professor, then returned to Adam. Jonathan suddenly turned to the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, raising his voice, "would you take a book seriously if a 10-year-old boy and his cat were its defenders? Or would you rely on reason, data, and peer-reviewed journals?" He smirked, expecting laughter. But it never came. Adam's reply was quiet, yet it fell like thunder. "Reason without heart is like a sword without a hand. It may be sharp, but it doesn't know where to strike." The room fell into complete silence. Adam looked directly at Jonathan. "You say, science holds all truth, but science cannot measure love. It cannot define loyalty. It cannot explain why a mother weeps when her child is in pain, or why this cat, who cannot speak, still knows when I am sad." Jonathan's eyes narrowed. "Emotion is not evidence. And evidence isn't everything," Adam said. "Sometimes truth whispers, not in labs, not in books, but in silence. At that moment, the cat stood. At first, no one noticed, but Adam did. She stretched, slow and deliberate, eyes focused on the stage. Her tail swayed in arcs. She said nothing. Yet somehow Jonathan noticed too. His eyes flicked toward the cat, then back at Adam. "Enough," Jonathan said, his voice hardening. "Tell me this. If your Quran is so powerful, if your God is so mighty, then show me a miracle. Not words, not emotion, something real. Right here, right now." The room froze. Adam looked down, then slowly knelt beside the cat, placing a hand gently on her back. He looked up. "Miracles don't always shake mountains," he said. "Sometimes they whisper, right in front of people who are finally ready to listen." Jonathan scoffed. "You're stalling." "No," Adam replied softly. "I'm preparing." Then he stood. "You want proof? Then keep watching, but not with your eyes." Jonathan laughed bitterly. "If I don't see it, I won't believe it." Adam turned and returned to his seat. "And if you refuse to believe, you may never see it." The moderator sensed the shift in the room and called for a short break. People rose, some whispering urgently, others stunned into silence. A few were visibly shaken. Jonathan remained at the podium, tapping his fingers. The cat stayed still, alert, watching. Something had begun. No one knew where it would lead. When the break ended, the atmosphere was transformed. The air buzzed not with debate, but with anticipation. Some in the crowd whispered, "He's just a kid." Others replied, "Yes, but listen to him." Jonathan sat rigid, eyes fixed on the floor. His tapping had stopped. For a man known to command every room, something had cracked. The cat hadn't moved from Adam's side, still silent, still present. The moderator stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We now resume the dialogue between Professor Jonathan Miller and our youngest speaker, Adam." Polite applause followed, but it lacked the casual enthusiasm from earlier. Now they weren't watching a performance. They were listening, for truth. "Yo Nat." Adam nodded. "History is full of pain. But who caused it? The religion, or the people who used it as a weapon?" Jonathan clenched his jaw. "Do you blame science for the atomic bomb?" Adam asked. "Do you blame chemistry for poison gas? Or do you blame the hands that used them?" That struck deep. Jonathan stepped back slightly. Adam's voice remained calm. "You mention harsh punishments, but forget that the same book which says eye for an eye also says forgiveness is better. You see one verse, we see the whole message," Jonathan snapped. "I see manipulation. I see people twisting verses to kill in the name of mercy. That's not divine. That's dangerous." Adam's eyes didn't waver. "You see that because you read it only to disprove it, not to understand it." Jonathan raised a hand, exasperated. "Enough philosophy." He turned to the crowd. "If someone claims a book is divine, we must test it. Publicly, not emotionally." He reached into his bag. Gasps erupted. It was a copy of the Quran. Even Adam flinched, not from fear, but sorrow. "I brought this," Jonathan declared, holding it high, "to prove a point. If this book is truly divine, then show me what happens when I burn it. Where is your God then?" Chaos. Cries. Protests. Some stood, shouting. Others covered their mouths in horror. Security whispered into radios. Adam remained still. So did the cat. But now she was standing, her tail stiff, her body tense. Her eyes burned, not with fear, but something ancient. Adam walked forward. His voice was low. "Professor, you don't need to do this." "Afraid of what will happen?" Jonathan mocked. "No," Adam said. "Afraid of what won't." Jonathan's brow furrowed. Adam's voice rose, just enough. "If you burn it, the ink will fade. The paper will curl. The pages will turn to ash, but the words, the truth, won't burn, because they never lived on these pages. They live in hearts. Tears welled in many eyes. And if you do this, Adam continued, you will burn something in yourself, something you might never get back. Jonathan stared at the boy. His hand trembled slightly. This is not how we find truth, Adam said softly. Not through fire, but through light. And just when it seemed Jonathan might relent, he struck a match. Screams, shouts. The crowd surged, but before the flame touched the book, a sound echoed. It didn't come from any person. It came from the cat. Not a meow. A deep, rising, mournful sound. Unnatural. Chilling. Like a groan from beyond. Everyone stopped. Even Jonathan froze. The cat's eyes glowed, wild, ancient, unexplainable. The flame flickered. Jonathan's fingers loosened. The match fell. Unlit, Adam stepped forward. She's not just a pet, he whispered. She's a witness. Jonathan backed away. People cried openly. The cat sat down, tail wrapped again. The moderator rushed forward, picking up the Quran with trembling hands. Jonathan stood pale, shaken, his confidence gone. Adam didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He returned to his seat and gently placed his hand on the cat's head. The debate wasn't over, but something had already changed. The fire hadn't touched the Quran, but something else had ignited. Inside people. Inside the world. The embarrassment was sharp, but Jonathan had endured mockery before. What truly unsettled him this time was the boy's composure. Adam's calm, his unwavering faith, and the way he answered each question, not with arrogance but with serene logic and quiet sincerity, lingered in Jonathan's mind. And then there was the cat. He kept replaying the moment, the sound it made, the way it stared, the eerie stillness. Deep down, though he refused to admit it, he sensed something had happened, something beyond the natural. He muttered under his breath, "Coincidence. Just coincidence." But even his own voice didn't seem to believe it. Elsewhere in the hall, Adam sat beside his mother, surrounded by a few local attendees. Some offered words of comfort, others just stared. A woman leaned in and asked gently, "Adam, did you plan this? Did you train the cat?" Adam shook his head softly. "Number. She just reacts when truth is being tested." The woman blinked, startled. "That's strange." "She's done it before," Adam added, "but only when something really matters." His mother sat close, her hand resting on his shoulder. She said nothing, but her eyes, full of awe and quiet worry, spoke volumes. She had raised him to be righteous, but never imagined he would stand before giants. An event organizer approached, jittery. "Adam, the media wants to speak to you. Interviews, international coverage, CNN, Al Jazeera, BBC." Adam shook his head. "I didn't come here to be on TV. I just came to ask questions." But those questions had become sparks, and the sparks had ignited something far greater than either side anticipated. Across the city, social media buzzed with theories and reactions. Some hailed Adam as a prodigy. Others whispered the word miracle. A few skeptics insisted the cat had been trained. But those voices, Jonathan didn't reply. His gaze narrowed. Maybe she sensed something. Maybe I almost did something I couldn't come back from. Inside, Adam knelt beside his cat. She nuzzled his hand and purred gently, a stark contrast from her earlier tension. It was as if she, too, sensed that the worst had passed. One of the conference hosts approached. "Adam, the professor hasn't requested to continue the debate. It seems he's done." Adam looked down. He's not done. He's just started asking the right questions. Outside, Jonathan stared at his reflection in a dark window pane, and for the first time in years, he saw something unfamiliar in his own eyes. Hesitation. In the days that followed, The debate video went viral, over 20 million views. Memes, commentary, emotional reactions. Some mocked, many were moved, but what no one could explain was the cat. Clips were slowed, analyzed by behaviorists. Some blamed instinct, sound frequencies, or unseen stimuli. But no one could explain why she reacted when she did, why she stood, why she groaned, why her presence froze the room, and, above all, why, in that precise moment, a man who had scorned religion for decades dropped the match. Some called it divine intervention, others poetic irony. But Adam called it mercy, the mercy of a Lord who sometimes speaks not through thunder, but through silence, through a child, or even a cat. 3 days passed, but the echo remained. Jonathan had canceled his return flight. He turned down all interviews. For the first time in his life, he had no script, no speech, no certainty. He stayed alone in his hotel room. The Quran, still in his possession, was neither burned nor discarded. It rested on the desk, unopened, unread, but present. And something had shifted. He no longer looked at it with scorn. He looked at it like a sealed door, a door he wasn't sure how to open. The cat still haunted his thoughts. He tried to explain it. Pheromones, crowd energy, training. But late at night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning above him, he kept hearing that sound again and again. It hadn't been fear. It hadn't been pain. It had sounded like a warning. That morning, he did something unexpected. He opened a religious text. Page 1. Surah Al-Fatiha. In the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate. He frowned. Compassion? He had always assumed the book began with fire and punishment, but the opening was soft, reflective. He turned more pages, verses about stars, oceans, the human heart, justice, orphans, forgiveness, knowledge. One verse struck him harder than the rest, and he taught man that which he knew not. He leaned back in his chair. Knowledge. Not just information, he whispered. There's a difference. He didn't realize it, but he had begun speaking aloud, as if something was listening. Across the city, Adam had returned to daily life. At least, he tried to. His mother hugged him more tightly now when he left for school. Strangers on the street stopped him, some with questions, others simply to thank him. Some looked at him like a miracle, others like a threat. But Adam remained unchanged, quiet, thoughtful. The white cat always by his side, now as much a mystery as he was. At school, some teachers treated him kindly. Others eyed him with suspicion. A few even asked whether it had all been scripted. Adam never responded with ego. I just said what I believed, he'd say. The rest wasn't me. Back at his hotel, Professor Jonathan was still reading. Not debating, not dismissing, just reading. First the Quran, then biographies of Muslim scientists, Islamic history, articles on metaphysics, logic, and belief. He stumbled upon a quote by Ibn Sina, the Persian polymath. The more I studied the body, the more I saw the soul. That line stayed with him for hours. He didn't know what was happening inside him, only that something was unraveling, not in chaos, but with peace. Then came the dream. It wasn't vivid or colorful, but it was clear. He was walking alone in a vast desert. The sky above, dark, but not menacing. Ahead stood a small child, facing away from him. Beside the child, a white cat. Jonathan called out. The child didn't turn. He walked closer. The child raised a hand, pointing to the sand. There lay a book, its pages open, words glowing not with fire, but with light. Jonathan bent to touch it, and woke up. He sat upright in bed, chest heaving. A dream, he told himself, yet it had felt more real than the debate stage ever had. That morning, he made an unusual request. A private meeting, not with a scholar, with Adam. When the organizers contacted Adam's family, his mother was hesitant. "Why does he want to meet my son again?" she asked. "Hasn't he done enough?" But Adam agreed. "Sometimes," he told her, "people break just before they begin to heal." The meeting took place in a quiet library room. No cameras, no crowd, just a boy and a man who once mocked everything. Finally, Jonathan spoke. "I don't understand what's happening to me," he said. Adam waited. "I've built my whole life on logic, proofs, data, but that night, something cracked." "It wasn't me," Adam said softly. "You heard something you weren't ready for. That's not breaking. That's awakening." Jonathan exhaled. "I hated religion, the rituals, the guilt, the rules." "You hated how people misused it," Adam replied. "Not the truth itself. You just didn't know there was a difference." A pause. Jonathan looked down. "Why a cat?" Adam smiled faintly. "Even in the Quran, animals are signs. The ant, the bee, the bird. All creatures worship in ways we don't understand." Jonathan looked at the cat, breathing gently. "I wanted to burn that book," he whispered. "I had no guilt, and then, suddenly, I couldn't move." "That wasn't the cat stopping you," Adam said. "That was your soul, grabbing your hand." Jonathan closed his eyes. "Then what now?" "You don't need to become someone new," Adam said quietly. "You just need to let go of what never belonged." Jonathan looked at him. "What doesn't belong?" Adam's voice was soft. "Pride, anger, fear." He gazed at the boy for a long moment. "You really meant it. Your tent," he murmured. Adam nodded. "I'm learning." He glanced sideways. "So are you." They sat together in silence. The white cat stirred, stretched with feline grace, then gently padded over to Jonathan. He froze, unsure, yet she brushed lightly against his leg, then settled beside him. He didn't move. Adam spoke, his voice soft. "Allah doesn't always answer with words. Sometimes he answers with signs." Jonathan looked at the cat, then at Adam. He said nothing. Because some answers don't need words. There were no handshakes when they parted, no dramatic declarations, no concluding summary, and yet, something irreversible had shifted in that quiet corner of the library. Jonathan left the room not with answers, but with a weight he had never carried before. A strange weight, not of argument, but of stillness. He was filled with questions, but for the first time they didn't feel like ammunition. They felt like anchors. Something had made him stop drifting. He had stood before a boy and a cat, and both had shown him more truth than decades of academic applause. The world outside hadn't paused. By the end of the week, the video of the debate had crossed 50 million views. From Argentina to Japan, analysts picked apart Adam's words, Jonathan's silence, and, most bewildering of all, the quiet cat's interruption. Speculations flooded in. Some called it spiritual. Others insisted on neurological explanations or primal animal instinct. But none of the theories felt whole. And when Jonathan Miller, the once feared critic of religion, vanished from public view for a week, the world grew restless. Then came the storm. In a pre-recorded interview with a British network, Jonathan finally reappeared. The host, an old university colleague, leaned forward and asked the question everyone had been holding. "Jonathan, what happened that night? And what happened afterward?" He didn't deflect. "I was shaken," he said simply. "Not by a child's argument, not even by a cat, but by how I reacted." The host blinked. "You've faced Nobel laureates, theologians, philosophers. What made this different?" Jonathan turned his gaze away from the camera before answering. "I realized I had built my whole identity on attacking belief, not understanding it. I never really listened. I waited for others to speak, just so I could pounce. But now, I'm listening." The internet erupted. Some hailed his honesty. Others mocked him. Atheist forums branded it weakness. Religious voices, though cautious, began to watch him with hope, not triumph, but curiosity. And Adam? He was still going to school like any other 10-year-old. Some classmates whispered. Teachers watched him differently. Some with admiration, others with suspicion. Rumors spread. Some said he was a trained actor. But Adam remained unchanged. He still sat by the classroom window, still helped the librarian sort books, still walked home with the same white cat at his side. Media offers came. Interviews, book deals, speaking engagements. Adam always replied the same way. "I'm not a performer. I just asked a question." Meanwhile, Jonathan found himself lost in the echoes of what had happened. He tried revisiting his own work, books, lectures, debate clips, but they rang hollow now. Not wrong in logic, but empty in spirit. He had wielded reason with precision, but the boy had wielded sincerity, and sincerity cuts deeper. So Jonathan retreated. He began reading, not to argue, but to understand. Questions he once dismissed began to haunt him. What is the soul? What is consciousness? Can science ever explain meaning? And why, above all, did that cat look at me like it knew something? He sought answers through logic, but logic began to crumble under the weight of something unfamiliar. Experience. Some truths, he realized, aren't meant to be dissected. They're meant to be received. One night, alone in a quiet apartment, he opened the Quran. He read for 3 hours, and then whispered to himself, barely audible, "I was wrong." It wasn't a confession to anyone, just a murmur to the silence that now filled him. But the world wasn't quiet. As Jonathan's words went viral, people from all walks of life began reaching out to Adam. Children, thinkers, even celebrities. Adam's mother, overwhelmed, suggested turning off their phones. But Adam just said, "Let them ask." Someone might be waiting for a question. Where there is light, however, darkness pushes back. A prominent secular podcast mocked Adam, accusing him of emotional manipulation. Clips were doctored to discredit the debate. One viral tweet read, "A cat meowing doesn't prove God." A reply went even more viral, "She didn't meow. That's what makes it unsettling." Threats followed. Journalists hovered outside his school. Their gate was vandalized with the word faker. When asked why he wouldn't respond, Adam said, "The truth doesn't argue. It stands." Jonathan watched this unfold, shame growing in his chest. "They're trying to break something pure," he whispered one evening. So he did what no one expected. He defended Adam publicly. On his social media, he wrote, "I've debated hundreds of people. None changed me like this boy. You may not believe what he believes, but don't mock what you don't understand. I came to defeat religion. Instead, I was defeated by sincerity." The conversation shifted. Critics grew quieter. Respect, not agreement, began to spread. Adam, untouched by fame, remained the same. Still walking, still smiling, still quietly changing lives without ever trying to. And somewhere in the world, something stirred. A group of students launched a campaign. Ask like Adam. The slogan, "Faith begins with a sincere question." Thousands joined. Atheists sent doubts. Muslims shared reflections. Christians and Jews spoke of moments where silence had spoken louder than sermons. The world hadn't converted, but it had paused. And in that pause, light entered. Not through a preacher, not through a scholar, but through a boy and a cat. Life moved on. News cycles changed. But something remained. Quiet but steady. A boy with honest questions. A cat that interrupted a fire. And a professor once certain of everything, now certain of nothing. Jonathan returned to England. No new lectures, no rebuttal books. His agent pushed him to capitalize on the attention. He refused. He spent mornings walking through woods, no phone, no agenda, just stillness. And in his coat pocket, always, the same Quran, the one he once almost burned, not because he read it daily, but because he felt vulnerable without it. He hadn't admitted it yet, not to the world, not even to himself, but the man who once lived to destroy religion had begun to fear dishonoring it. One evening, rain tapping on the roof of his countryside home, he sat on the porch, and without thinking, without planning, he whispered, "God, if you're there, I don't want to fight anymore." No thunder replied, but something softened inside. Later that night he opened his laptop. He searched. Adam. Debate. Catboy. Videos flooded in. One caught his eye. Short. Recent. Adam sat in a modest chair, the white cat asleep at his feet. The interviewer asked, "How do you feel now that Professor Jonathan admitted you changed him?" Adam smiled. "I didn't change him. The truth did. I just knocked on the door." "What do you think happens next?" the host asked. Adam stroked the cat. "I think he'll start walking. Maybe slowly, maybe with fear, but every step will take him closer to what he's already seen." Jonathan closed the laptop, looked up at the gray sky, and, for the first time in years, let a tear fall. Life in Adam's city returned to normal, but the boy was no longer unknown. Schools invited him, not to preach, but to speak about questions. Mosques welcomed him with love. Scholars admired him for doing what few grown men ever could, make arrogance tremble. His cat became a local legend. A mural appeared, the silent witness. Adam stayed humble, refused interviews, refused rewards. When asked what he wanted, he always replied, "For people to ask, with sincerity, that's all." Then, one day, a letter arrived. No name on the envelope. Inside, handwritten words. "To Adam, I don't know who I'm becoming. I'm no longer who I was, but not yet who I want to be. The day I met you, I came to win. Instead, I found something better. The courage to lose and finally learn. You asked if science could explain compassion. I couldn't answer then. Now I know, no formula, no molecule, no theory has ever created what you and your cat gave me. Respect, mercy, peace. I'm still walking, but now I'm walking toward the truth, not away from it." "Thank you." Jonathan Adam placed the letter on his bookshelf. No smile, no tears, just quiet acceptance. He stepped onto the balcony. The cat followed. Together they looked up, not searching for signs, just breathing peace. 2 years later, a man arrived quietly in Adam's city. No fame, no press, just a familiar face, older, gentler. He walked the streets, bought a pocket Quran with English translation, then sat outside a mosque, not to enter, just to be near. A group of boys nearby whispered, "Isn't that the professor?" But Jonathan didn't hear them. He was deep in thought, listening not for applause, but for silence. And finally, he closed his eyes and whispered, "Bismillah." The world never got a dramatic conversion video. No headlines, no declarations. But those who knew him noticed. He had stopped mocking, stopped debating, started listening. He no longer chased stages. He was chasing stillness. And somewhere, a boy named Adam, now a little taller, still walked his quiet path. The same silent cat by his side. The questions had not ended, but they didn't need to. Because truth doesn't shout. It whispers, and those who truly seek it, hear it.